Okay, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, actually. So thanks, Professor Giacomo Tavecchia. We are here today for the first of our 2022 dialogues on ethology and behavioral ecology. Today's seminar is the first of the session of this year. So I would start reminding everyone of our program for this year. So I will share my screen to show you the program. Today is the seminar by Giacomo Tavecchia that is entitled Living Close, Doing Differently, Demographic Differences Across Sister Populations of an Endemic Vertebrate. The next one will be just in a couple of weeks on the 25th of March with Professor Diego Rubolini from the University of Milano. And he will be talking about between conflict and cooperation, social dynamics in avian broods. And then again, after 2 weeks, on the 11th of April, Lisa Locatello from the Stazione Zoologica Anton Dorn di Napoli, she will be talking about quite an interesting topic that is sexual selection and the ascent of females, lessons on mate choice from benthic fishes. Then on the 6th of May, about 1 month later, Sergio Pellis from the University of Lethbridge from Canada, he will be talking about play fighting, reciprocity, uncertainty, and the making of social brain. These will be very much about cognitive behavior. So it will be quite interesting. More on the ethological side rather than the behavioral ecology one. And then the final one will be on the 27th of May, when Darren Croft from the University of Exeter in England, sorry for the siren, will be talking about the evolution of menopause in toothed whales. And so it will be quite a nice final seminar. We might be able to engage another professor from the US, from Texas, but we don't know yet neither the topic nor the date, but we will keep you posted. So without further ado, let's stop sharing my screen and let me stop screen sharing. Here it is. And let me introduce to you to today's speaker, that is Professor Giacomo Tavecchia. So Giacomo is currently tenured researcher at the IMEDEA. I pronounce it Italian way because I guess it's a Spanish institution, so maybe the pronunciation is quite similar. IMEDEA is a mixed institute of the Spanish Council of Research and the University of Balearic Islands. Giacomo obtained a doctorate in ecology and evolution from the University of Montpellier, France. It's a pretty impressive one, actually. And his research has focused, since then, his research has focused on applied demography, the management of game species, and of populations of conservation concerns. His work has been characterized by a numerical approximation to obtain unbiased estimates of demographic parameters in nature populations. And since 2011, he teaches an international course on capture, mark, recapture analysis applied to the conservation of animal populations. So again, without further ado, I leave the stage to Giacomo for his presentation, and thanks again for your kind availability to give this seminar.
It's a pleasure. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Alessandro and Daniele for making this dialogue happening. I will leave you, well, we bring you on a journey like a roller coaster between concepts of ecology, evolution, statistics, and I'm working actually in population dynamics, and at the IMEDEA, as Alessandro said, is the equivalent of the CNRS, an institute of the CNRS in Italy. And I basically deal with population ecology in a broad term. Ecology is a bizarre science to me because it has a very few theorem, and one of the most important theorem. Let me see if I can get the presentation. Is the More Theorem. The More Theorem is a theorem applied to population functioning, and it states that to two populations that are synchronous, their dynamics is synchronous at the same level that their environment is synchronous. So basically, the correlation in time is equal to the correlation between the environmental variables. Why this is important in population dynamic is because it's increased the probability that close population get extinct simultaneously. This theorem has been proved in many different taxa, from invertebrates to large vertebrates, but also have some exception. Of course, local selective pressure and some functioning of the population, such as immigration and individual behavior, can disrupt the climate-induced synchronies. So if I say ecology has a very few theorems, it actually has quite a lot of laws or dogma. One of those that I'm particularly interested in is the Island syndrome. The Island syndrome refers to a set of morphological and behavioral changes that occur on Iceland due to the isolation character of this population. Of course, the mechanism underneath are random genetic processes like a founder effect or genetic drift, but also local selective pressures in some particular islands. This has been proved in many taxa, and is actually the mechanism brought for the macroevolutionary and divergence of, for example, passerines in different islands, but also is the base of the biogeography theory, and is the mechanism that is being proved in the change in body size in many taxa, such as bird, reptiles, amphibian, and also mammals. Of course, as any other rules, it has some exception because in some cases, selection is changing so rapidly that direction and the intensity of selection changes, and it goes away from the expected direction stated by the Island syndrome in theory. Well, then we have these two frameworks, if you want. One is imply a stressor from the climatic forcing, and the one from the isolation. So is it more important the climatic forcing or the isolation and supposedly random genetic processes? So basically the question is, are neighboring and isolated populations similar? When I say are populations similar, of course, I mean individual life history tactics, because the population is made by individuals. But when you see a population, when you look at population level, then it's kind of the population. So here brings me to my talk, which is titled Living Close, Doing Differently. It's a work that I did in collaboration with Andrea Roger and José Manuel Igual from the IMEDEA institutes where I work. Our model to compare or try to disentangle this environmental forcing from genetic processes is the Balearic wall lizard. The Balearic wall lizard, or Podarcis lilfordi, is an endemic species of the Balearic Islands. Is distributed mainly in basically only in Majorca and Menorca Islands, and only on an islet. This is because in the main islands is thought to be extinct when Romans introduced some of the mustelids or other potential predators that get extinct the lizard on the main islands. But there are still about 42 populations that lives in isolation in small islets off the coast. They do is black lizards, but they have some changing morphology. Some of the population are brown, and very few population has the two type of morphs. We still don't know exactly if one is better than another one in terms of fitness and what are the advantages to be dark or to be brown. But this is what it is. The good part of this model is that there are some phylogenetic data and behavioral data available from past researchers. And so we can already have some idea of how different are the population. So the first genetic work has been done by Barbara Terrassa and colleagues, checking on 41 localities or islets, and she found out using mitochondrial DNA 4 big genetic networks. So within the networks, the population are very similar, genetically speaking, but across the networks, they are more different. So we pick up 3 islands that belongs to the same genetic network. So we were quite happy to exclude that there were different subspecies or with a different genetic architecture. The 3 islands you will receive throughout the talk. One is very small, is the one in the bottom of the 3, and the other one are larger. One that is in the middle is the one which is actually the largest islands. They are close together. Within 4 kilometers, 4.5 kilometers, more or less. So we are pretty confident that they share exactly the same environments. So we were thinking that this could be 3 replicates of the dynamic of the population, and we expect, given the Moran's theorem, that they actually fluctuate synchronously. Well, if you think that we choose this model because of this, you're actually wrong. We choose the model because of this. And if you think that lizards are active only during very good weather, then it's a perfect model to work with. Anyhow, we were able to select these 3 islets. The ecological characteristics are, of course, different. They differ in size. But if I have to rank them, possibly the 2 largest ones are more similar. They have a number of flowering plants, which the lizard fed on fruits and on the pollinators of the flowers, but also they have some distance to the coast, which is more or less the same, 300 meters, and they are very close together, less than, well, about 1 kilometer. The one that is singled out is the smallest islands because it's very small, less than half an hectare, and it only have 3 species of plants with fleshy fruits and very little vegetation. So if we expect some island to be different, it should be that one. But when you check the lizards, this is the frequency of the density plot of the size of lizard. And you see that actually the largest islands and the smallest islands as the largest lizards. So the intermediate islands is as lizards which are more or less 1 centimeter less than the other. So this is the first and possibly the most important question we were asked is why these lizards are smaller in an island which has a similar characteristic to another one, and the one where very different characteristics, they're actually very similar in body size. Well, we went to check into the diet, and the diet of the 2 islands, which are the largest islands, are similar. They mainly prey on beetles and ants, but also fleshy fruit in that islands. While from a stable isotope analysis, the other islands were actually different. The smallest island, not surprisingly, has less to eat. So the diet is different, and but if we have to rank the similarity, there would be the one with a very different size, population, body size, sorry. So we did some more genetic study. We use microsatellites this times on a number of individuals for the 3 islands. And again, the islands that were more genetically similar, basically they cannot be separated, are the ones that are larger. And still the body size is 1 centimeter different between males and females. So we didn't really know what was going on. And then we decided to get into more details and do some comparative evolutionary demography, which means to compare all the demographic parameters and the role of body size in the different population. This is when I say the roller coaster is that you go deep into many problems because you need to follow individuals. And the problems are practical problems, but they are similar to any other ecological studies of natural population. So one first problem is who is who? How do we follow individuals if we don't know the identity of the lizard? The other problem is if we don't see all the animals, how we can count them? We have to get an estimate, and how to get an estimate of this. And then the last problem, which is not really simple to solve, is the demography in ectotherms, which are animals with continuous growth, is size dependent, not age dependent. What's the difference is that size is a continuous variable, so you need a continuous model, while age is discrete variables, and you can use discrete models which are mathematically more simple. So there are some solutions for this. We need to recognize individuals. We need to use capture mark recapture models that correct for detection probability, and we need to use integral models for study the demography. So this was, of course, practical problems, how we implement all this. And I like to quote Captain Jack Sparrow that the problem is not actually the problem, is your attitude about the problem. And this is why we took the right attitudes. We keep one problem at a time and trying to solve it. So the first problem is who is who? How do you recognize lizards? There are many possibilities in marking animals, and reptiles in particular, they were using clip toes. So you basically cut a part of the fingers and make a combination. And this was very bad for me to, not just ethically, because possibly it doesn't really hurt the animal, but especially because you don't want to mutilate an animal that you want to estimate the survival. Because maybe there are some problems in cutting the finger, and hey, how many fingers I should cut at the animal number 2000? It would be without any fingers. So we developed a aided procedure, well, computer-aided procedure to recognize individuals for the patterns of their scales. The patterns of the scales are different from individual to another one. So far, we have more than 3,000 individuals classified and recognized. So what you do is you make basically a picture of the ventral part of the animals, and then you pre-process with the software, and the software will tell you whether you already have these animals in your repository, and this you can be confident because it shows you the two different pictures, and in the slides you see here two pictures of the same animals caught in different time. You can see here the patterns is recognizable here. You can see some funny scales here, which are these ones, and in these indeed the same individuals. The software, by the way, is available for free here, and it's now applied in other type of animals, especially amphibian or animals that have some natural mark. Okay, so what do we do with this? Once we recognize the individual, we can build encounter histories. Encounter history is basically each individual, whether you have seen it or not, and every time you're going into the field. So we build this series of 1 and 0, where 0 is that the animal is not caught, and we can estimate demographic parameters of the population from the individual-based data. That's what Alessandro was saying. I'm teaching a course on this at the last week of November every year if you want to attend it. So what do you do with this data? First, how do they grow? We were interested in the size of the lizard, or to explain why the lizard has different sizes in different animals. So this is how they grow. We compare different grow models. Apparently the better one is the seasonal grow that stop during the winter, of course, when the lizards are not very active. But also it was interesting to see that the environmental stressor did influence the growth of the lizard, especially of juveniles. So the juveniles' growth was density dependent, was also negatively dependent on the drought during the summer, and it was positively associated with rainfall during the spring. This was only on juveniles. There was less climatic signals in the growth of yearlings, and there was none in adults. Although they are, in theory, animals with continuous growth, the adults will not change according to the environmental variables. So how come they grow? How do they grow in the 3 different islands? Well, again, it's funny because the body growth is similar between how fast they grow is similar between the 2 largest islands, but they reach different asymptotic size. So the one in the intermediate islands are smaller than the other one. So if you rank the islands according to the body growth patterns, that the 2 largest islands are together. But if you do according to body size, the largest and the smallest islands are together. So it's still something going on in the intermediate islands. We don't really know. It's not how fast they grow, and it's not the diet, because these are similar to the largest islands. So how many there are? We applied the spatial explicit capture models that takes advantage of where you capture the animals and build a model of animals' movement underneath to estimate exactly how large is the area you are sampling, and you get an estimate of how many individuals per hectare you have. You see here is fluctuating very much, but the fluctuations are fluctuating within the same year, because population is low in the summer and then it goes up during the autumn with the recruitment of the young animals. So if we just look at the autumn and across the year, this is how they fluctuate, and it's not really similar, I would say. So again, these ideas of the Moran effect, although they are very, very close islands, they do not fluctuate synchronously. The one that is smaller fluctuates less. So again, there are more let's say similitudes between the largest islands than with the smaller one. Okay, so how much they survive? They survive quite a lot. This is what is predicted by the island syndrome, but the pattern was different. This time, the largest and the smallest islands had a similar pattern, that it does not vary with size, while the intermediate islands has a very marked senescence of females that after more or less 5 centimeters, they start to decline pretty much. That was not the same case in the other islands. So what about reproduction? Well, it's very difficult. This is another problem. We had to estimate the reproduction or the breeding output of females in each island. So what we did is that we brought some females from each island in the laboratory. We let them to lay eggs and we free them again. And then some egg was hatching, and we freed the hatching as well. So how is the difference between the different islands? Well, the patterns again are very similar between the largest and the smallest islands. Is what you normally expect from lizards, is that there is a positive association between size and number of total eggs laid by the female. While this association was not present in the intermediate islands, where the females were 1 centimeter smaller. Apparently, they start to reproduce very small, and they keep reproducing with the same strength, we say, or effort throughout their life. So there is not this increasing number of total eggs laid with the size of females. Okay, so what do you do with all this? Well, we can put together and build some integral modeling of the population, which means you bring together the function that describes survival and growth according to size, and fertility or hatching success and heritability according to size. So you basically build some function, and then you put them together and integrate over the size of the lizards. So this will allow you to know whether selection on body size is directional or not, because we can check the advantages they have in terms of fitness now, because it's a combination of survival and fertility according to body size. So this has been done with elasticity analysis, and you have here the plots on survival, the first three, the first row, and fertility, the last row. And when you see the red dot, it means that these are the size which have an advantage in terms of fitness. So technically speaking, is the size that influences the most the population growth rate or the individual fitness, if you want. So you can see that when the intermediate islands, where the animals are smaller, has a very high advantage for smaller size, which is combining fertility and survival is more or less around here. So in a size that is not the largest size recorded. While on the other islands, yes, it seems directional, and it seems that a very large animal has an advantage. So basically, the body size is playing different roles in the islands, and apparently does not correlate this role with what was the ranking of the islands in terms of genetics or in terms of size of the islands. So we ended up with having this problem. We still have the problem, so any ideas is welcome, that ecological characteristic, genetic, and diet are very similar between the two largest islands, while the growth, the pattern of survival, the pattern of fertility, and the body size are more similar between the largest and the smallest island, rather intermediate one. So we enter now in another roller coaster movement in what I would say is a speculation, but I think it's a good moment to do it. We can speak about that. We can have a real dialogue on this speculation. So we went back to a theory, and the theory of fitness landscape. So basically, you can assume that individuals in each island are on a particular strategy, which is a good strategy for the environments where they live. But if there happen a perturbation, then they can move to another strategies, which is a different combination, but equally well and equally stable. So we were looking for a possible perturbation that occur, especially in the intermediate islands, because it's the one that single out with a very small lizard compared to the other one. And we then go back to the ecological characteristic of all the islands. And there is one that is very different, is that in these islands, the immediate one, there has been an historical human settlement. So we went into the history of the islands, and apparently these islands has been colonized for 400 years by Phoenician. They're still as Phoenician small village. During the Middle Age, it was used for stone and salt extraction because it's very close to the coast, and there was the port, the small port built there by the Phoenician, the local people. And then in more recent histories, a lighthouse has been built because it's close to a port that is now used for tourism, and there has been some goats, and it's still used as a place for salt extraction. So there is no doubt that this island has the largest anthropogenic footprints of the three. And we find out this underestimated hypothesis by Gregory Pergil that in small islands that was colonized by humans, there's been a selection for a smaller size. This seems pretty bizarre, and I'm not saying is what's happening. You remember we are speculating a little bit to find out a reason why in these islands, regard to all everything we check, we couldn't explain why they are smaller. So it's possible that the anthropogenic presence selected for larger, for a smaller size. And why? Because people normally they interact with environments, and for example, if you bring a goat in the islands, then all the plants disappear. If you bring a cat, like Phoenician was going around with the cats, of course all the lizards will disappear, and so on. If you making a lot of perturbation, apparently, you may have a selection counter the larger size. This has been proved with the fossil records. The work by Pergil is quite interesting to read, but it's something, I'm not saying it's happened, this is what has happened, but it's something to keep in mind. So we went back to our genetic data, and we tried to build scenarios and see which one was actually likely to have generated our data on heterozygosity. And so apparently of the 4 scenarios we selected, the one with a series of bottlenecks of the population in the intermediate islands is the most likely one. Again, I'm not saying it's happened. I'm not saying this is big evidence for evolution, for selection against the largest side, because remember we're using microsatellites, which are neutral markers, but it's still something that to keep in mind, that possibly there has been some important demographic bottlenecks in that islands, which wiped out some of the variants, genetic variants. So back to our first question, are neighboring and isolated populations similar, or individuals, are they on the same strategy? Well, the answer is obviously not. And between the Morans effect, so the environmental stressors in terms of climate, or the random genetic process and local selective pressures, definitely there is a strongest message from the local selective processes, although these islands are very, very close. So again, the devil is in the details, unfortunately. Large questions are very nice to answer, but very seldom you can collect data, because when you started to do it at a very particular level, then you had a lot of variability coming up. But still, this is it's fun to collect, and also it will teach you something about the system, not just the lizard system or your system. So island populations share many characteristics that's undoubtable. They have higher survival, low fecundity, high density. They have similar within-year oscillation. These lizards in particular don't have any anti-predator behavior, so they don't lose the tails, for example. And they are they're not very aggressive, because, of course, to defend the territory at such a high density is basically impossible. So there is a kind of collapse of the territorial system in a very small territory, and basically only the food resource that is at that time available. But of course, each island is also a world apart, and no matter how close they are. Then what we learn is that we should probably pay more attention to the role of past and present human pressures, because this is we probably not see it now, but it may have shaped the current fauna. So this is more or less all. What do we do? Where do we go from here? We are doing some collaboration, of course. We are trying to complete the genomes of the Podarcis lilfordi and to do some SNPs analysis and some microbiota that will help to answer questions on selection, on past selection, but also on phylogeny of the different population. Then we're doing some collaboration on coloration and sexual selection with the University of Valencia. We're still doing some demographic data. We extend now the study to other population. We keep doing integral models, although they are really not very, very easy. And we also do some integrated modeling, which is integrating different sources of data in one single model. And we have a side research topic with the University of the Balearic Islands, which is to improve the pre-processing of the imaging doing, for example, some artificial intelligence or deep learning techniques. So with this, I leave you, and I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready for any questions or suggestions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Giacomo. Very nice talk and very interesting topics. And even the approaches and the theoretical, assumptions and background that you gave were really, really interesting and stimulating. I would have a few questions, some from the public and some from myself. If you don't mind, I will be the one bringing them to you. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. So, in your the picture that you sent us for preparing the oh my God, what's the title? The image for your presentation. There were two different phenotypes, right? A dark and a green. So, but you have only one in this island, or there's both of them? Only the dark one is here.
Okay, in these three islands is only the dark one.
The dark one.
Normally the islands are monomorph. Either they are all brown or they are all black. But there is one particular population which is in the Cabrera archipelago. It's a very large island, and we found both. Although we've not really brown, if you want, but we found some brownish lizards. There is still an enigma because they check on the genes that codes for melanism, and they couldn't find any difference. So they are thinking that the difference is in the gene expression on the RNA level and not the DNA level.
So kind of a okay. Okay. Yeah.
So there is not really under selection, and possibly when an island is being founded by some of the lizards that are black, there is no way they can turn brown. But I really it's still unknown, and that's why we began this collaboration on sexual selection and on coloration. So the colleague will come with a special camera to check in the ultraviolet and with a 3D scanner to see if there are some differences in terms of morphology as well of the lizard. We do have the data, or we are collecting now the data in this population where they are mixed on survival. So we will be able to check at least on survival if there are some differences between brown and dark. Remember that, for example, the Podarcis muralis has a different polymorphism as well in the same population, and apparently they are stable. Like you don't have hybrids. So either it's white ventral or orange or brown or something like this. And
so there's no evidence of associative mating, mate selection.
Well, not that I know, but I have to admit I'm not particularly well. I didn't really. I didn't go deep into the literature of this problem. Okay. It's still an open problem anyway. I know that it's not an easy answer.
Okay, before I move to another topic, I would like to keep on asking these. So, so you said someone looked into microsatellites and they could tell apart the different genotypes from the different islands. They could. Okay.
Well, up to a limit. I mean, the difference in microsatellites is evident in this case for the smallest islands is very evident. You can single out from the other two, but for the other two, you have to go deeper and see smaller differences. So some islands neighboring islands are very, very similar genetically, but still they may have a number of polymorphic loci that differs. We did this also with the microbiota, and the first results suggest exactly the same. That the smaller islands has a different set of bacteria, intestinal bacteria, than the other two, while the other two are very similar, although you can still separate the two.
How long have they been separated, these islands, for? Is there any, for a long, long time? You mean thousands of generations of lizards, I expect?
Yes, in theory, yes. In practice, we don't really know, because if you see now the number of people that are going from an island to another one, it's very easy to have some very recent translocation. Maybe it's only one animal, but it's possible. So we don't really know what's happened in the Middle Age, or whether they were there. We know they are there since at least 100 years, but we're not able to go back. Now the people that are excavating the Phoenician settlement are searching for lizards' bones, and we will be very interested to see if they were there since the beginning, let's say. We know that the level of the sea changed quite a lot during the history, and at some point during the Messinian crisis 5 million years ago, all the islands were together. So
Yeah, but in 5 million, I guess, there
yes,
was a lot of,
a lot of lizard generation.
yes, a lot of stuff happened. Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering, always on these line. So if you could keep some breeders from each one of these islands, and if you could mix them up and breed them, make some crossovers breeding among them, what would be your expectations? You would expect and breed them and grow them in similar artificial or captivity context with that libitum food and uniform food. Would you expect to keep seeing these traits being kept even in captivity? Or would you, in other words, are these different traits expression of phenotypic plasticity according to your feeling, to your gut feeling, or they are just already genotypically somehow not, I don't want to say fixed, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. There are some practical problems in doing what you're suggesting, because it's a species highly protected, so you can't really do any experiments involving genetic crossing. So because each island has a very particular genetic pool, if you want, apart the two that are very similar, the other one. So you don't know what to do then with the hybrids of these pools. And the people here, well, the local government is not very happy in knowing that you're moving lizards around or you're crossing lizards. But certainly this is the type of experiment that we should do. My hunch is that if it was only plasticity, then we should in 10 years we should see some changing in the size of the lizard, because the environment's changing quite a lot. We have years with a lot of storms. We have years with very hot summers, which we know that they are bad for lizards, and the population changed quite a lot. But yet, still, the largest lizards is always small in one island, is always smaller than the largest in the others. So my hunch is that is not only plasticity. Of course, you have plasticity because we've seen in the young that the growth is depending on environmental condition. So you have a part of plasticity, of course, but I'm not sure it's all plasticity. But yeah, we should see it. We are doing this SNPs analysis on single nucleotide polymorphism, and see whether we can get more insight on the selection and the genetics of it.
Which gene are you targeting on these?
Well, no, I don't
Neutral.
know exactly, but I think these are very general genes. As long as you do the same with the same individuals, you're targeting basically one single nucleotide.
Okay, then there is quite a nice question on the comments on YouTube that I would like to share with you, and then it somehow is linked to another question that I had. Maybe I ask you first this question, and then you answer the other question online. So the one for me is I might have missed when you said something about natural predators, because you said that none has an anti-predatory expected behavior or like the tail thing, right? So there's no natural. I guess there are birds. So I guess, is there any rats, for example, any mammals that could prey on these small islands?
Yeah, okay. We know that there are no some, let's say, classical predators. For example, there are no cats on the islands. You don't have mustelids on the islands. You don't even have a lot of breeding birds that prey on lizards. You have gulls, but gulls they are known to have the opposite effect because they bring a lot of food
Oh,
in the islands. So for the lizards, is actually quite good normally. And it's not a classical prey of gulls. Of course, they can learn how to catch them, but they're normally we haven't found any big evidence of predation by gulls. We know in one population there we have seen one gull they learn how to wait for lizard basking and then get one. And it was basically eating only lizards, but
and there's
it's
no
not.
rats, no rats.
Okay, there are rats on one island, the one with most anthropogenic footprints,
The
but
big,
there are
no, the middle, the one in
yeah,
the
the
middle,
intermediate
middle
one,
size.
where the lizards are smaller. But
Mm.
the rats has been a very occasional. We've seen some rats in some years. We check for rats in others here. We haven't seen it, and this is very typical in these islets. You have colonization and extinction very fast from the rats, and also the rats' interaction with lizard is not so clear. We know one of the islands that had the highest density of lizard also has at the highest density of rats. Not in these three islands. It's another one that is where rat has been eradicated in 2010 because they were really in a very high density. Yet the lizard was a very high density, and the population didn't really change after rat eradication. So we are not sure what
Okay.
type of competition or predation rats will do on lizards. There are some in the largest islands. We've seen some birds like kestrel, for example, that predate on lizard, and indeed is the only islands where the lizard produces sounds when we caught them. Well, some lizard, not all. Some
That's cool.
individuals they do like beep like this, and I've been told this is a signal of animals that are under predation. But it's occasionally predation again. They are moving in a very thick vegetation, so I don't see any particular birds going, especially for them. Uh,
Okay.
so,
Well, I would have expected, otherwise they would have developed or kept some anti-predatory
yeah,
strategy. Yeah. So, and then let's go back to Lorenzo's question about if there are any data that may suggest the presence of different personalities. And he's pointing on the picture of all the lizards climbing on you. Was kind of surprising in this regard. Within the
yeah,
same population, he's asking for differences in that.
yeah. Okay, two things. This is very interesting. We were planning to make some experiments with a friend, and unfortunately, he's not here anymore. This lizard has a very particular behavior. Some they are very, some they bite us when we handle, and some they actually don't do it. Some go first to any particular object, whatever, and some they don't. So there are definitely some differences. But all the lizards has this behavior, which for me is an under selection in this case, because they are, everybody say, oh, they're so cute, they are so, because they come to you. But they come to you to know if you can be bitten, can be eaten. Because in this type of islands, the food brought occasionally by the sea is very important. For example, a dead fish or a dead bird or some butterfly washed away. This type of unpredictable food is very important. So the searching behavior is very developed. So, and they go to search everything that is new whatever you put your camera, and then you have 20 lizards watching your camera and trying to bite and to lick every.
But they are not being cute, right? They are just
No,
and
they are not being
trying
cute.
to
Well,
understand whether
they
they
are
can
cute
eat you.
for us,
Okay,
but
cool.
I do think this behavior is under selection. And indeed, there are some differences from one individual to another one. We still don't know exactly why, but there are some bold animals that bite, some others that never do it. And there are
Regardless of age and sex.
no, the females bite as much as males. There are some particular behavior of males which are despotic on food resources. So if you put some food resources, the first that arrive is always a large male and try to defend it. But when another 20, 25 lizards arrive, that it's impossible to defend. So everybody is having a bite of the food.
Okay, so thanks for this. I think this is a very, very interesting, kind of research avenue on personality and this attitude of different
Yeah,
individuals.
it is.
Yeah. And Lorenzo is making a comment about the fact that you have a very cool shirt, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
then there is Riccardo, another student of ours, that would like to know something about Montana and the Kurt. And
Yes.
considering the biotic differences between the two islets, the genetic difference between the two populations higher between these two compared with Montana and Nagardia's population, and considering that body size in lizards is usually a plastic trait, really susceptible to changes, how is it possible that the two populations show so similar asymptotic size? I
Yeah.
guess Ricardo is an herpetologist.
No, but he's right, and it's very interesting. Indeed, we don't know. We have some extra data that suggests that the strategy in the very small islands is really like an elephant. I mean, we know that there are very little newborn in that islands. The population is quite constant, amazingly constant for such a small vertebrate, and the survival is one of the largest ever found in lizards. We caught last year an animals of age 14 and still
Wow.
alive. So,
Wow.
and you have to think that it's only 10 centimeters large. So after 14 years, it's still there in these small islands. But it doesn't really reproduce much because the population is constant, and we don't see many newborns, very, very little. The other one, Naguardis, where they are smaller, from a demographic point of view, this is more like an R strategy, if you want to use these terms, because they're fluctuated quite a lot. And this type of fluctuation is related to the population growth of the animals and the net reproductive rate. We know that when their net reproductive rate, so when you reproduce quite a lot, in terms of demography, you make fluctuation. And there is this very nice work in the 75 that suggests that when it's even higher, like in insect, they produce chaotic trajectories, so unpredictable. And indeed, the type of fluctuation we're seeing, if you remember the slides with the gray line that going down steep and then going up steep, these are only seen in Naguardis, where the net reproductive rate is higher than in the other population. So it really looks like the smaller islands is on a strategy like a very slow strategy, while the intermediate islands is in a very fast strategy. And apparently the two strategies are okay. They are only because they are stable.
That's interesting. I wonder on this size thing. So we are talking about animals that the more they get older, the more they are bigger, right? They keep growing, right? So, and I noticed that, as Ricardo was pointing out, there were just a few millimeters of difference in length. Have you looked at which are the components of those 5 millimeters? Meaning, Is it the tail longer rather than the body as a whole? Or what about the body mass, for example, the weight itself? So what are these biometric features that actually change? Because 5 millimeters might be, are they, so I don't know what is the variability of that estimate, for example, those asymptotic estimates. So are they really a lot in terms of total length?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't say it, but we don't measure the tail. We measure from the nose basically to the cloaca,
Okay.
and we don't measure the tails because the tails is very variable. They can lose the tail. They can because of the
Yeah.
intra specific competition. They can also use the tail to store some of the
Yeah, fat,
food, well,
fat,
yeah,
yeah,
energy, so the
and
fat, and so the tails is quite very variable. So we only measure from nose to cloaca, and indeed 1 centimeter is quite a lot. Yes, I will say that it's it's really even if you measure the largest individual ever found in the population, you still have this difference of 8 millimeters, 1 centimeter, and if because it's from nose to cloaca, that makes quite an important difference. Uh, Regarding the weight also vary because they eat or they don't. Depends. It vary across the individuals very much. But there is some allometry between weight and size, which differs males and females. More or less, the females are weight more or less as they are large, while the males weight a little bit more because they are bigger and with a fatter tail.
but do
So
you see a body size different as well as a length difference, or only
yes,
so?
yes, 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 yes,
So there
yes,
was coherent. Yeah, it
yes,
was.
yes, yes.
Yeah, and the methodology of capture. Can you remind me? Was it easy to capture them regardless of the age and sex?
Well, we caught them with pitfall traps
Mhm.
because they are so curious, if you want, and they go to explore. They naturally fell into the trap. They actually jump into the trap. So we don't have any problem in capturing 100 animals per day. Uh, there is, yes, a bias on the size because
Yeah,
the
that's
smallest
what
lizards, we think they have problems in climbing the trap, and they do have a type of different food, so they stay on the branches. They eat a lot of nectars from flowers, and they eat quite a lot of small items, and they don't tend to jump into a trap with a lot of adult lizard because in these islands there is cannibalism as well. We don't
Oh,
know to which extent, but it's been found some cannibalism evidence, not exactly in these three islands, but in other islands of the same species. While people were checking the stomach contents, they found other lizards, basically. Um, we never see it, so it's not so clear that there are cannibalism. But I can't exclude that the very small lizards are bitten by the very large one, so they try to avoid them or to share the same small space.
okay. So I was also very. I really like the idea of was a belly picture repository. Was it a belly? That
Yes,
was
yes.
really cool. I wonder if we could use it for other, even other species, maybe. I don't know, like
Yeah, well, it's been
footprints of
used with bombina
okay.
in Trento. It's been used in fish, in sharks, the same software, in geckos as well, and in the punteruolo rojo, the red weevil, and what else? Oh, in the tortoises as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's cool.
Well, you can play with it. It's freely available in our blog. So,
On animal demography, is that?
yeah, Animal Demography blogspot.
And I would like to remind everyone that Giacomo is offering those courses on mark recapture, recapture methods that are very, very useful for those that work on wild populations. So for those that are interested, you can find Giacomo's email very easily on the web. So for the moment, I don't see any other question. Let me see, just double check. Okay. So I guess that as many of you know, we have another question time with some of the students of the behavioral ecology course when we are done. Riccardo, are you part of the behavioral ecology course, or you are part? Yes, let's go for it. So let's go for it. We like questions and we have time, so don't be shy. So we are waiting for Riccardo, and yes, here it is. You have a fun, Giacomo. I think he fell in love with your study.
well, maybe with my t-shirts more.
Quite a smart guy. Very clever questions usually. Yes. So again, for the next seminar, just remember that there will be two moments of the seminars. The first one will be open to the public, and the second one is dedicated to the behavioral ecology students of the course in behavioral ecology for a more in-depth question time on the specific. Yes, that's what I meant. Riccardo just reminded that he is part of the behavioral ecology course, and so he's supposed to keep some of the questions for the behavioral course, behavioral ecology course question time. Exactly. Good boy. So, Giacomo, for the time, I really want to thank you. And of course, we will see in 5 minutes. So you can get a 5 minutes break, and then we can see in the other session in the team, Microsoft team group. Okay. So for the sake of this seminar series, I really thank you again for your time and your passion that we could see, and the topic that was very stimulating. So thanks again, and see everyone else on the 25th of March for Diego Rubolini's seminar that will be advertised on the same social media and through the same channels as this one. Thanks again to everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.